Hello and welcome to this Astranti video on the topic of scenario analysis. Now this video is an extract from our P3 topic, which is part of our full course of CIMA materials. The topic of strategy comes up in E3, P3 and F3, and scenario planning also comes up in P3 and E2 more specifically. It's relevant across the CIMA syllabus for both your exams and for the case study. So let's jump in and take a look at what scenario analysis is and how it can help a business.
So, as the saying goes, in business, the only constant is change. Businesses have to continually adapt to ensure that they have a competitive advantage. After all, it's survival of the fittest. This amount of change entails uncertainty, and scenario analysis is one technique that can help us to manage this uncertainty. So the analyses that we've looked at thus far are relatively static. What's the environment like at the moment, and how do we stand right now? Scenario analysis goes a step further. It helps us to consider where we are right now, but also how we might end up in different possible future eventualities. By analysing how these different eventualities are likely to play out, it can help us to adapt. The better we can be at predicting different possible future outcomes, the better we can be prepared for them. The better the preparation, the better the adaptation. So we start the process of scenario analysis by asking what if? And as I touched upon earlier, we can consider our broad environment through Porter's 5 forces and also our industry-specific environment using PESTEL analysis. We're considering how any of the forces in Porter's 5 forces and any of the factors in PESTEL might change in the future. What if this thing or that thing were to change? What type of scenario would be likely to unfold and how prepared would we be? So that's a bit abstract, so let's consider some possible concrete scenarios that a business would benefit from considering. The first would be an economic recession. Do we have the resources that we need to weather this recession, or would we benefit from building up some emergency funds? What about the competition that we're facing? If a new competitor were to enter the market, would we be strong enough to compete with them? Conversely, if a major competitor were to leave the market, would we be able to produce enough of our product or deliver enough of our service to meet the increased demand? Would we be able to fill the space that the departure of this competitor would leave? What if exchange rates were to fall dramatically? A significant fall in the exchange rate might mean that we'd have to survive on our domestic market alone. Would we be able to do this, or is our domestic market too weak to survive a significant exchange rate drop? What about new innovations? Specifically, would there be new developments in technology or other logistics that would allow our competitor to produce their products at a significantly lower cost? If we feel that it's likely that our competitor could make significant cost savings in the future, we need to consider ways that we can keep up. How about our suppliers? How strong are they? If one of our suppliers were to go into liquidation, would this be a big problem? If it would be a big problem, we would benefit from diversifying our suppliers. The more suppliers we use, the further we can mitigate the risk of a supplier going under. It would be highly concerning if we relied on one company to supply us alone and that company was looking shaky. So what we're doing is taking stock of where we are right now, and then based on this, how we would fare in different scenarios. So future 1 could be the exchange rate falling, future 2, our suppliers cutting their costs and delivering a cheaper product or service to their customers, or future 3, which could be based around, for example, 2 things, maybe an economic recession and, as a result, our supplier going into liquidation. How would we fare in each scenario? Analysing the consequences of these probable future scenarios can bring us a number of benefits. It can help us to define our strategy in a way that mitigates the risk of these different events causing problems for us in the future. Specifically, we want to reduce our level of risk by taking appropriate action. This could mean taking appropriate immediate action or just developing plans that we could implement in the event that a risk event occurs. Either way, we're using forethought to help ourselves to adapt to situations as they occur. In either case, we're using forethought to make ourselves as adaptable as possible and, hence, to help us to remain competitive. Well, this is all well and good, and it assumes that we've conducted our scenario analysis properly. However, this isn't easy to do, and there are a number of risks involved in the scenario analysis process. Specifically, scenario analysis is prone to human error and bias. It's not easy to be objective. We're trying our best to predict possible future scenarios. However, unfortunately, nobody has a crystal ball, so our judgment will be clouded by our disposition. Are we optimists or pessimists in general, or are we optimistic or pessimistic about certain things? For example, imagine a company has two analysts tasked with conducting scenario planning. One of these analysts thinks that the growth rate is likely to be 5% in the near and long-term future. However, her colleague is more optimistic. He thinks the figure will be more like 8%. Each person conducting their scenario analysis will arrive at different figures because of their immediate assumptions relating to the economic growth rate. So the more pessimistic analysis will arrive at a lower growth figure than her colleague. Now, it's possible that one of these has arrived at their figure by taking greater consideration of the available facts. However, again, we're predicting the future, and at a certain point they will have to make a subjective judgment. It's this type of uncertainty that makes scenario analysis so difficult. Are these differences in the two figures due to human error and bias? It's difficult to know, and this is a key risk of scenario planning. Further, scenario analysis involves consideration of multiple different risks, and none of these risks in reality occur in isolation. Consequently, it's almost certain that they will interact in some way, and predicting the outcome of these interactions is a huge and complex task. The more different possible interactions we can consider, the more accurate our scenario analysis will be, and therefore the more useful. However, there's a limit to the complexity of the analyses that is possible to conduct. The fact that we can't fully account for every possible and conceivable interaction of the risk that we've identified is a key risk of scenario analysis. The next risk is based on the fact that we might be operating based on limited information. We'll be using every bit of information that seems relevant and that we have available. However, the fact is that we don't know what we don't know. This unknown factor might interact with the factors that we have identified and produce unknown and therefore unanalyzed scenarios. As the scenario analysis that we've conducted won't account for this potential future outcome, it will be flawed, and this is another major risk of scenario analysis in general. The final risk that I'll mention is the fact that scenario analysis is costly and time-consuming. Trying to identify all the possible different risks and the way they interact and the ensuing outcomes is a complex and difficult process. This complexity and the need for the relevant experts means that it takes time to do. So when a company is deciding whether or not to use scenario analysis, they need to consider how complex their needs are. How detailed an analysis would they benefit from conducting? The more detailed the analysis, the more time-consuming and the more expensive. Therefore, it's important that they have enough accuracy in the analysis that they need to help them with their scenario planning. However, they shouldn't overspend and conduct an unnecessarily expensive analysis. There's a happy medium, and going over and above this might mean that they spend too much. This type of overspending is another key risk of the scenario analysis process. So once a company has conducted its strategic analysis and its scenario analysis, the next thing to do is look at its options. It needs to generate strategic choices and then pick between them, and this will be the focus of the next sections.
So we're now at the end of this Astranti video, but there are more to be found on our website as part of our full course. On there you can also find mocks and revision notes to help you pass your exams. If you want to hear more from us, why not subscribe to one of our social media accounts? We can be found on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for watching.